What are the current and past cuts? What are they and what have we done historically? Can the November levy cuts return? And if so, when? What type of levy in March? And then factors to consider when selecting these options. So why make cuts now? It's based upon our 5-year forecast, and maybe some of you have or haven't seen it, but what you're looking at right now is our 5-year forecast. This is based on no cuts at all and no levy passage. So this is where it stands currently. And you see, we're in fiscal year. We go in fiscal years. Fiscal years are a little bit different than calendar years, but we're on fiscal year 20 right now. We're projected to end at 7.5, 1.9 million in 21, and 22 a negative deficit of 7.8 million, 19.5 million, and $33.6 million deficit. And to put that in perspective, the Ohio Department of Education recommends that we have 3 months worth of unencumbered cash reserves on hand at all time, that we shouldn't go below 3 months of what it takes to operate our school district. And 3 months of what it takes to operate our school district would be pretty close to about $30 million. So you can see we are well below the threshold, even in where we are carrying small carryovers. So what you're looking at now is what's a 5-year forecast if there was no levy passage, but there is no Soy High School. Soy High School was one of the cuts made in November. Obviously, it doesn't take place until next school year. But what you're looking at, the first 2 years remain the same. And on that backside, you see 32.7 million, and I'll go backwards. It was 33.6 million with it. Without it, it's 32.7 million. So what happens if we just pass a levy in March? So soy's not in here. This is no soy in this slide. Again, the first two stay the same. Year 3's 3 million, $1.2 million deficit, $7.7 million deficit. And what's important to note about this particular slide, this is with the March levy passage. So if we didn't make any cuts, we just pass in March and hold, we would be back on the ballot in 2022 for new money. Now, I think you would all agree that it's highly unlikely that we'd be able to pass a levy in 2020 and come back and ask for new money in 2022. That's not feasible. That's not going to happen. This is a March levy passage plus 2 million in cuts. And what you see next is what's called House Bill 305. Has anybody heard of House Bill 305? Probably some of you. And most people haven't. House Bill 305 is the new funding formula for public schools. It is only in committee right now. It has to go from committee to each chamber and be signed by the governor. So it's a long way from being reality. It would hit in 2022, but we are projected right now to receive $1.3 million in additional funding. So what I added was 2 million in cuts and House Bill 305, which this is about the best case scenario. And you can see it gets us through our 5-year forecast with a positive number. Also, you probably all are aware that we have a lot of levy renewals. And there's only certain spots in the calendar that give us an opportunity to ask for new money when we're not also asking to renew a levy. That's part of the reason that we are trying to go continuing, but I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So in summary, this is what they look like if you want to see them all stacked on top of one another. You got the first one is the current 5-year forecast at 32.7 million. The line below it is the forecast with soy in place. That's 33.6 million. March levy passage with no cuts, $7.7 million deficit. And then you've got the March levy, 2 million in cuts in House Bill 305, and you have a carryover on the 5th year of 1.2 million. You won't have to take pictures of these. I'll have this on the website. So current and past cuts. I think it's important. Certainly these cuts impact students. No. Are there other cut choices? Yes. But very, very difficult to find, and I'll show you some examples. So the cuts right now, but to know why those were selected and not some other more traditional cuts, you have to go back a little bit. How many of you had a student in the district in 2011 and 2012? Some of you. You might remember we went through a very similar situation in 2011 and 12 that we're going through right now. We were on the precipice of being taken over by the state, and when you get taken over by the state, what that means is the school board is no longer holds any power. The superintendent and treasurer have to run everything through a commission, and essentially what they do is they cut the state minimum standards across the board and then ask you to go pass a levy. That's how it works. And when you cut the state minimum standards, all the things that you're experiencing being cut right now are just the tip of the iceberg. So this is an article from Thursday, September 29th, 2011. We were at that point facing an $87.9 million deficit. So really our situation was worse in 2011 and 2012 than it is today. So our unions made significant concessions on union agreements, and the majority of the cuts, which were almost 14 million in cuts, came exclusively from, or primarily from, the teaching staff and support staff. So to put that in perspective, across the board, and these cuts are still in place today, there were 7, FTE means full-time equivalent. There were 7 administrators cut, 50 teachers cut in 2012. There were 7.5 secretaries cut, 5 custodians cut, and 7 food service workers cut. And then we also outsourced transportation, and then eventually outsourced management of food service. In addition to that, at that point, prior to that, our insurance contributions were 2% per employee, which are unsustainable, I agree. Certainly wouldn't find that in the private sector. But they went to 15%, from 2 to 15%. They're now at 20%. We just renegotiated with our unions just a couple of months ago. We did insurance plan changes. By the way, insurance contributions equal 2.1 million in savings. Insurance plan design changes, 2.4 million. Staff, administrators, everyone, secretaries, every employee took step freezes, 0% pay increase for the entire staff from 12-13 and 13-14. The staff also took 3 furlough days, non-paid days where they worked and were not compensated. And then, of course, our staff reductions. In totality, we cut nearly $14 million out of the budget. So what are our current cuts based upon? So now it's very difficult, as you can imagine. What do you cut now? There's nothing left to cut. Willoughby Eastlake runs extremely bare bones. We've offered it many, many times to come in and see Mr. Parkinson, anyone who chooses to, and our books are they're open. Come and look at them. We'll process some of this stuff on Sunday and Thursday. The dialogue kind of going back and forth, working in small groups. What can we cut? What's the answer? I don't profess to have all the answers. I certainly don't. I know what our finances are. I know what our history is. So we met with the board in a work session a few months ago before we really got into the levy campaign. And the idea was, okay, school board, administration, what do we focus on? If we fail in November, what are we going to do? And why is the levy failure so much more significant when we could just pass a few months later in March? Why is it a big deal? Well, this is why it's a big deal. If you pass in calendar year 19, you start collections in January 2020. If you pass in March, you don't start collections until January 22, which leaves us in deficit spending, which we are currently. I'm sorry, 21. I'm sorry, my bad. 21. So it goes until January 21. Thank you. So that leaves us in deficit spending one more year, and it just further compounds the problem. At this point, I don't even know if we're going to pass in March. I certainly hope we take everyone in this room and take the energy in this room and move that levy forward and pass it. And people have asked, well, didn't you budget for all the things for this school year? It's got to be budgeted for, right? That's logical. And the answer is yes, except it was budgeted, the appropriations were based on a levy passage in November and collections to begin in January. So the priorities for cuts were these: protect core course offerings. Don't do anything that would cut core academics. That makes sense. That's our main mission. Priority 2 was to have the least impact on students from an academic perspective. Now, I know one, for example, that was an unintended consequence, which will be fixed over the next couple of days, is NHS. That's a problem that needs fixed. That impacts kids' college applications this year, and we can't mess with that. So we'll get that reinstituted. Only thing I'd ask you to keep in mind is, and certainly not perfect, our people certainly aren't perfect, but we were dealing with hundreds of different scenarios, and honest, to being quite frank, that one just got through and it shouldn't have. But we'll fix that. So we need to have a least impact on students academically. And then the hardest part was we had to hit $8.5 million. We're struggling to hit $2 million, folks. All those cuts you're seeing right now are $2 million. If we don't pass in March, it goes to $8.5 million. Where on earth will that come from? I honestly don't think we can do it. So the current cuts, I've heard a lot of people say, well, I'll talk to people that have a student in athletics, and they'll say, well, you just picked on athletics. And then I'll talk to somebody who's in band or music, and they'll say, you picked on band or music. So I wanted to show you and these are the cuts. Now again, we're going to work through this as a community on Sunday and Thursday. So this is just what Steve Thompson thinks are the most important things to bring back. They may not be. They may not be to you. I don't know. But this is what I think is the reason we have 200 people, or however many people we have in this room tonight. So athletics, we cut all middle school athletic programs. And I don't think people understand the amount of money that we're talking about. No one wants to cut anything any more than I do. And I get it. I totally get it. Sports or mutes, for me personally, if I didn't have sports, I wouldn't be standing here today. And not because I was a good athlete, not because I certainly didn't get a scholarship. No, there's not a lot of people out there looking for 5 foot 6 inch, 160-pound kids to play nowhere. But it kept me on track. Growing up with a single mom, that was the reason I went to school, and that was the reason I kept my grades up. For my daughter, who's at Kent State now, it would have been musicals. She was in the XL Tech theater program, in the marching band. My oldest son was in the marching band at the University of Pittsburgh. So I've got kids across the spectrum. My kids are, I don't even know where they got it all from, but they do different things just like your kids. And I don't favor sports over band or choir over athletics at all. These were extremely difficult decisions to make. But I think the numbers will surprise you how much they cost. Athletic programs, we think, well, all we have to do is cover busing and officials. And we'll get that covered in pay to participate. Pay to participate doesn't even come close to paying for the sport. You've got officials, transportation, coaches, paying a piece of their retirement. You've got athletic trainers, liability insurance. It's much more than what you might think of at first blush. It's $332,460 a year for our middle school athletic programs.
I like to ask, is that for the district as a whole, or is that per school?
That's the district as a whole. Good question. That's the entire school district is $300,000. If you wait until the end, I'll try to get through because there's so many people. If I start Q&A and we'll never get through. Freshman athletic programs, $100,000. So that's in total cuts that were made to athletic programs is $432,460. Non-athletic programs, again, these are the ones that I think mean the most. You'll have a chance to tell me I'm wrong or right Sunday or Thursday. These are the things that I would bring back first. All band and class trips, $137,030. Non-athletic supplementals, that's your NHS director, that's your prom advisor, and prom will go on as well. That's your academic, that's all those supplementals. There's a lot of them, 1.5 million in supplementals. That's $287,570. That's a total savings of $424,600. From a fiscal perspective, we split it right in half. So, what's the 5-year forecast look like with a levy? And by the way, if you total those up, that's a little over $800,000 of the $2 million in cuts. You following me? Am I making sense? Of that original $2 million, when you include all this is in the $2 million in cuts, but I think these are the ones that have most of you sitting here. If you put those back in, pass in March, that drops our reductions to 1.2 million, plus House Bill 305, I'm assuming that goes through. Then you're looking at the 5-year forecast and we're back on the ballot in 2023. So what I'm saying to you is I think we need to put that stuff back if we pass our levy in March. That's my opinion. But what else do we have to do? We have some hard work to do, don't we? Because we got to figure out how do we pick up $800,000 more in cuts and bring these back. Otherwise, we're going to be back on the ballot too soon and we'll lose again. A lot of questions about pay to participate. I know that, and I know some of you would do whatever it takes to come up with the money for your student to participate, as would I. But I want to talk to you a little bit about what our concerns are from a pay to participate. Access for all students in the Willoughby Eastlake family. I know we get tunnel vision about our kids. I do too, no criticism. But you just start thinking, I've got a 7th grader who's in the musical, or I've got a 7th grader in choir at Eastlake Middle. And I'm going to focus on that. As, again, so would I, if I were in your shoes. But we have to look at the big picture. So, if what we don't want is programs coming back in certain schools, but not in others. Whoever has access to deeper pockets, whoever happens to have a mom or dad who works at Lubrizol who's willing to cut a check out, they get to participate in whatever the activity is, but the other kids on the other side of the district don't. We can't allow those inequities to occur. And Title IX requirements. I'm sure you all have heard of Title IX. Title IX basically is federal mandate that requires equality between male and female sports. So you can't add boys basketball back but not add girls basketball back, for example. We have negotiated agreements with our unions. And I mean, this is absolutely no criticism of our unions. So, you know, we had one of the solutions that we first thought of for NHS was that we would run it through our principals. But the union expressed their displeasure with that. And I get it. But they don't want our union negotiated agreements being kicked out and somebody coming in and volunteering and taking those positions. That's not gonna fly. And if you don't know, if you haven't negotiated union contract or worked in a union environment, you might not get that, but if you have, you would understand. The other one is that I didn't mention before I even mentioned this last one is also sustainability. Just because we can come up with the money this year, are we going to be able to come up with the money next year, and the year after, and the year after? I don't think that's a long-term solution to fundraise our way into trying to, we can't have enough bake sales to raise the money that we need. And then I would just ask you this question. When you think about the impacts on the March levy, if we fail the March levy, our cuts go from 2 million to 8.5 million. 2 million to 8.5 million. Even if we can subsidize something, is that a good idea long term? Does that put us in a better position to pass in March? I don't know. I'll let you ponder that. Can cuts return? So again, I'm going to show you an idea that I have. It doesn't have to be this idea, but this is an idea. So I worked some numbers. Pass the levy in 2020, that's a no-brainer. That has to happen. Take the operations at Soy High School and move those operations into each of our high schools. We have the STEM labs. We can create that in an environment there. Now, those of you that have been around a while, you know that Soy is a program that I started. I believe in it. It's done extremely well, and I think it's benefiting our other buildings as our other buildings start to pick up those PBLs and those teaching techniques and use them in their schools. That's what it was designed to do, and it's slowly beginning to do that. I believe in what we're doing there, but I also know the price tag is steep. We talked about no busing. That's incredibly, I don't know if you've looked at the maps and if you have elementary students, but for elementary and middle school students, a burden on having them walk 2 miles is crazy. It's pretty crazy. So I would propose full transportation for our elementary students and our middle school students, but not for high school students. Doesn't have to be that. You understand what I'm saying? I'm just mapping something together. Increase our pay to participate. So I did some calls today, and I asked other school districts around, what are they paying to participate? This certainly will not cover it, but it generates money and knocks those numbers down. So Mentor pays $200 for first sport, $50 for additional. Madison plays $125 for first, $75 for second, $50 for third. Both of them charge in the middle schools. Mentor's $150 for first sport in middle school and $50 for others. So there's out there, we could research and come up with a number. Obviously, we'd have to have a sliding scale for those on free and reduced lunch, as we should. But I think we could work that out and generate, I'm projecting another $200,000 in pay to participate fees across the 5-year forecast. Charge a nominal participation fee for all extracurricular activities like marching band. Maybe something like $25 a student, just to help knock that number down a little bit. Effective March 18th, if we did those things, I would propose these programs coming back. All band and class trips, middle school athletic supplementals, freshman athletic programming, middle school resource officers. would come back on after a passage. We can do that if we pass our levy and we make those cuts above. Now, maybe your priorities are different. We'll work through it. Maybe some of you have better ideas than I do, and I'm open to it. And to be quite frank, a woman in this audience that I talked to this morning, a parent that I talked to this morning, really planted the seed of the idea, why not charge something? We can offset that number we're trying to chase. That was a really good idea. I didn't think of it. She did. So thank you. I won't out her, but thank you. So we have to look at the next type of levy. And I've heard things like, you failed the levy miserably in August. You tried to sneak it through. Okay? Let me address that. There was no attempt to sneak anything through. When we got why are we in the position that we're in? In 2005, the state switched over to a tax system called the Commercial Activity Tax, the CAT tax. The idea that the governor and the legislature knew at the time that the CAT tax would generate less in tax revenue, but they thought it would make Ohio more business friendly, and in the long run, more businesses would come to Ohio, and by virtue of more businesses, generate more taxes and employ more people, et cetera, et cetera. On paper, looked fantastic. As a result of that, what the main piece of tax they were phasing out was called the Personal Tangible Property Tax. Tangible Personal Property Tax, TPP. It was a tax on all business inventory. So businesses didn't like it. It was not business friendly. So they phased it out. Our loss in 2005 has been roughly over the years about $8.3 million. At that time, the state said, we will make you, all school districts and public entities, full. So we will reimburse you. And it became known as the TPP reimbursement. And we got it for many years. And everything was fine. Kasich was elected as governor. Governor Kasich started a phase out of TPP. We knew that. A lot of people said, well, why didn't you plan for it? We did plan for it. We knew it. We were planning for it. Then on his way out of office, he took the process of phasing it out and significantly expedited it. So we are now collecting 597 this year. What about next year? 304, then 0. From $8.3 million. That's why we're in the position that we're in. The 4.99 mil levy replaces what we lost. It's not more money. It's not to go out and do fancy stuff. It's just to maintain all the things that everyone in this room wants us to maintain. So we decided to go with a continuing operating levy. So why in August? By the time we knew of the phase out, and being completely honest, I've said this in many community meetings, and I contributed greatly to being on in August for this reason. The treasurer was coming to me saying, we need to be on the ballot, Steve. I think we need to be on the ballot. And I kept saying, no, 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 no. I told the community we wouldn't be on till 2020. You might not remember that, but I've been saying it several times since we passed our last levy in 2012. I wanted to hold to that. And then once it got to the point where it was clear that we were going to be in trouble if we didn't go on the ballot, we were too late to get on the May ballot. So then the decision was, well, do we go in August or wait until November? Now remember, 2019, collections begin when? January 20. Collections in March begin January 21. We know historically, every time we've been on the ballot for new money since 1959, the first time we've been on the ballot for new money, with the exception of our 2015 bond issue, every time we've been on the ballot, the first time we have done what? Failed. So I was afraid if we didn't go until November that we would definitely fail, and we would be putting ourselves in a much bigger hole. So we went with August, and we did everything that we always do for all of our levy campaigns, except put yard signs up, because you have to know that all the money we spend on a levy campaign is generated by donations. It comes from nowhere else, not general fund, not tax dollars. It's just what we can fundraise, and we're on the ballot all the time because of our levy renewals. So it's a constant battle trying to keep enough money in that account to run a halfway decent levy. But the only thing we didn't do was lit yard signs. We obviously failed miserably. We came back in for the November levy, and most unfortunately, as we all know, we failed Tuesday. Much tighter margin, but nonetheless, we failed. So why was it continuing? Why didn't we listen to the community and do a time-bound emergency operating levy in November? Didn't you get the message, Thompson? Didn't you get the message, school board? Well, we did, but you have to file 90 days out with the county Board of Elections. Thank you. The Board of Elections, 90 days out. By time we needed to file the paperwork to be in November, on the ballot in November, we hadn't had the August election yet. So that's why it was continuing. So the board's going to have to decide on Monday night, are we continuing again for a third time? Are we an emergency operating levy, time-bound emergency operating levy on Monday? So there's two types of levies that we're looking at. The continuing operating levy, that is a fixed dollar amount for an indefinite period of time. That's what we asked for. That appears as millage. So that was 4.99 mils, which generates roughly $8.5 million. The other type of levy that you're very used to is an emergency operating levy. It is a fixed dollar for a fixed amount of time. It must be renewed by the voters, and it appears as dollars. So if it would appear theoretically as an $8.5 million levy, that's the same thing as what we tried in November, but in dollars instead of mils. Now the county auditor will convert that to mils at some point, and it would be converted to roughly 4.99 mils. Does that make sense? So that's the two choices on the table. But some factors to consider, and I want you to take a hard look at this. This is the projected election cycle, based on the Ohio averages of districts being back on the ballot. So what we did, we just laid it out for the next 20 years. And this is what it would look like. New money in 2020, 22, we have 2 levy renewals, 23, a levy renewal. 24, a levy renewal. 28, new money, a renewal. 29, renewal. 30, renewal. 32, renewal. 33, new money, a renewal. 34, renewal. 38, new money, along with 2 levy renewals in the same year. And 39, renewal. We were trying to get out of that cycle. That's not good business cycle. I've heard, well, Steve Thompson, your ego's out of control, you're trying to force it down our throats, etc., etc. No, I'm trying to save us from this future. What's this cost us? Impacts of emergency levies. But every time you're on the ballot, it's $30,000 to $90,000 depending on who's on the ballot with you in odd years. We've already spent $500,000 renewing renewal levies. The biggest impact is on our credit report. We all have a number, a credit report. Well, so does the school district. Moody's is one of the rating agencies. Bill and I have presented there 4 times trying to increase our credit rating. But what's happening is they are decreasing our credit rating for 2 reasons. first and foremost, they look at all of our levy renewals and they consider us to be a risky investment. Because at any time, one of those levy renewals could be pulled off. Any one of those levy renewals fails, folks, we're dead man walking. Dead man walking. Then, on top of that, we failed some levies, now 2 in a row. Prior to our bond issue, that wasn't as much of a problem, but we now have over $100 million financed. Start moving that credit rating and moving that interest rate, and it's to the tune of $6 million that we're spending extra on, the community is, taxpayers are paying because of our credit rating. Again, those are the reasons we're trying to get away from emergency operating levies. It wasn't to jam something down your throat. It wasn't to be risky. It wasn't any of the above. It was because the long-term fiscal health of the district is far more stable if we get away from this funding process. So, but also you have to consider this, don't you? This is the reality that we're looking at. August 2020, we were defeated 80-20. That's crushing. And then we were defeated in just this past Tuesday, 53.5 to 46.5. We lost by 1,000 votes. So now you're sitting there as the school board in a very difficult spot, making a very, very, very difficult decision.
It's fiscal.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That's my typo. 2019. My fault. I'm sorry. I should say August 2019 and November 2019. So that's what the board is faced with, knowing that financially, business-wise, I hear it all the time, Steve, run your school district like a business. No business would finance themselves like this. But at the same time, the board's got to decide, what would the community reaction be if we come out with anything other than emergency operating levy? That's a tough decision to make. I hope that I see you all on Sunday. I really do. Sunday's going to be an opportunity. I don't want to give up a Sunday any more than you do. But I hope that you come, because Sunday's going to be the opportunity where we can dialogue, we can really start to burn through these numbers, look at different options. There's different options out there, for sure. And I know some of you have ideas that I don't. I'm 100% certain of that. I want to hear what they are. We'll have our treasurer there. We'll have our 5-year forecast pulled up on the big screens, and we'll be able to, you might come and say, well, what if we do X? We can pull it up, look at it on the 5-year forecast, and see what the financial impact of that is. Coming up with what we think our priorities are, things to bring back. I know you want them back. I want them back. But what are we going to cut in its place? I think you can see we have to cut it. We have to pass a levy and cut $2 million. So how are we going to do that? On top of the fact that we've already cut $14 million 8 years ago. So I'll take, you want me to take any questions? Okay. I'm sorry, I can't take any questions right now. But what we're going to do, because we're going to be here all night, I'll come back and talk to you though. What we're going to do.
The board might have some questions.
Okay,
So,
okay.
does anybody on the board have any questions about Mr. Thompson's presentation? Anything you haven't heard yet? I would like to have some more clarification on House Bill 305, or the bill, and everything is, oh, I'm sorry, I can stand up too. I personally want to have some more clarification on the bill 305, and we're counting on getting $1.3 million out of that. Is that a guarantee for us? So we might take that 1.3 million right out of there off the top. And when will we know about that?
I don't know how many of you people listen to AM radio. Does anyone? A few. A few. I was on the radio this morning or this afternoon with Representative John Rogers, who's a pretty influential guy in the state and at the state level. So my conversation with him was he felt that House Bill 305 would go through. He couldn't guarantee the dollar amount, but he believes it will go through. He's not sure if it'll be through before our March election, but he thought it would be finalized by the spring, collection to begin in 2022. 22. And that's what you see on our forecast is 22. So I can't guarantee it. And most of the time you don't budget based on, I can't guarantee, but at this point, we're trying to bring things back, and I don't want to leave money on the table.